Pecha Kucha 314, Midnighter out. So I got this from the library. I was looking forward to reading it more than the Batman and the Iron Man, because I knew what to expect with them. Midnighter is basically, it's the start of a single run for a superhero who used to be in a team book. He looks like a bootleg Batman. The job of the creative team was to make him something, anything. But what I find is that the book doesn't have any identity. And I think DC expected it would fail too. I learned more about who this guy is and what he does from the back of the book than the actual contents of the book. He's a dude who apparently has no childhood. He's a cyborg. He's got a supercomputer in his brain, and he's the world's greatest martial artist fighter. You know, he can super genius tactically outmaneuver anyone. So when I call him a bootleg Batman, it's not just because he looks like one; it's how he fights. I was pretty hyped for this for the first few pages. They've got a very interesting artist working alternatively, doing the first, the third, and the sixth comic. And he says some interesting things, like when he's in a fight and a bunch of dudes are surrounding him, and he says, "Hey, you guys think you're surrounding me, but I'm a goddamn genius. I'm arranging you." I'm like, okay, that's hype. But the problem is he spends a lot of this book talking a good game, but it's never backed up with the action. The book has a lot of... Because he's gay, it's got gay sex scenes in it. Nothing explicit, but the point is that they're used to break up the action, but they're also chronologically out of order. But all it really shows is that Midnighter is a guy who constantly is involved in frivolous activity that doesn't have any meaning, whether it's in his personal life or his crime-fighting days. He's also most famous for being in a supergroup who he was in a gay relationship with a bootleg Superman in, which is referenced in this book for some pointless reason. Also, this page notes a dip in art quality, which shows that editorially no one was expecting this book to succeed. If you're wondering who that half-naked, handsome young man is in the bottom left-hand page of this spread is, it's Dick Grayson, it's Robin, it's Nightwing. He's never in costume in this book, so I'm not quite sure why he's in the book, because he doesn't add anything to it, including name power, which is why you would have a superhero team-up. For some reason, because Midnighter is lol random, he handcuffs himself to Dick Grayson, and they have to fight handcuffed to each other. I guess because somebody thought that this would be funny or entertaining. Shrug. It also turns out that one of the many men that Midnighter was having gay sex with was the bad guy of the book, who secretly has stolen the secret past of Midnighter that the book alleges he's never had. Midnighter cares as much as I did at this point. Turns the tables on this guy, beats him up, and the book ends. It's a real shame. I wanted this book to be something, and it's just a bunch of noise and loud noises and flashy images. I was more entertained by reading bizarre H.P. Lovecraft books, stories that didn't really seem to go anywhere, like The Sweet Ermengarde or The Heart of a Country Girl, which was a bizarre short comedy stint about a country girl who gets involved in all kinds of bizarre things for comedic effect over the course of 4 pages. And then an even more bizarre story, a reminiscence of Dr. Samuel Johnson, which is 4 pages of H.P. Lovecraft talking in ye olde English for no discernible reason. I think it's the idea that he's pretending to be someone who knew famous people or something. I don't know. And I read a story called Dagon, which was more the typical H.P. Lovecraft fare of a man who gets lost at sea, who finds himself confronted by horrors he can barely understand. And I did a little, sketch thing of it, just of the key narrative tropes for my own personal amusement. And speaking of personal amusement, I saw Austin Powers 1 again this week. A very frivolous, enjoyable movie that does what it does, and you can laugh with it and get on with the rest of your day. I sure wish that Midnighter could have been more honest about what it was and gone that route. And in my Bison, I'm still trying to be kind of non-committal with these things. So just Bison doing wind poses with a couple of characters from Street Fighter Alpha 3, Junie and Julie, I think they're called, who are 2 of his subordinates. And it's a pretty flat, lazy affair. I was kind of thinking next week I should probably try and make it dynamic in some way, shape or form, because it really doesn't feel like it's achieving anything, even on the conceptual level. We will see if that's what I do, because I might just want to cut and run, as is my want for these things. So I really wanted this week to try and put more work in than I did last week with my manga book. And I succeeded. As much as I'm phoning in the art, as I'm just really trying to focus on panel layout and how much space I'm losing in each panel to the text, the words, and what real estate that gives me to work with. When you compare what I'm doing here to the storyboards I was showing earlier in the year, you can at least guess at what this is meant to be. And if I was to let you read this, you would be able to determine if this is something you might want to read if the art was actually what it's supposed to be. It's definitely still awkward for me because the closer I get to it being a finished thing, the more afraid I am I'm just going to end up with something as outrageously mediocre as that Midnighter book. If I can't make this book better than that book, I'm going to be a very sad individual. And that book is competently produced, but it's like I didn't pay money to read it, and I still want a refund. It could have been a Punisher book. It could have been a Deadpool book. It could have been they could have played with the idea that he looks like a fake Batman. It's literally a DC book, so they could have done some really interesting kind of half fourth wall things with a guy who apparently doesn't really have a past as well. And I believe the source material in which he comes from is better by far, because I think it's written by Warren Ellis. I could be wrong. It's one of the few franchises I've meant to look into but never got around to. But I certainly won't be going out of my way to pick up any more Midnighter books if I see them. But that brings us to the end of Pecha Kucha 314, and I'll see you next time.